Thankfulness, thankfulness. We're thankful for you, listener.
Welcome to the Thinklings Podcast, a conversation where good thoughts help renew the mind with the Word of God. I'm Charlie Carter, and I'm here with Tim Little and Andy Stearns. Let's jump into the conversation. Hello, Thinklings listener. I've got a special Thanksgiving promo for you over at fbbcbooks.com. If you go over there right now and order a bunch of books, you can enter the coupon code Thanksgivlings. That's Thanksgiving with an L and an S. You can figure it out. You're smart. You put that in at your checkout, you'll get 25% off your entire order. This does not apply to curriculum or hymnals, but everything else, you can get 25% off your entire order. So head on over there, order some Christmas books, go to our website, grab some of the books off of our lists, put them in your cart, use the code Thanksgivlings, and you'll get 25% off your order. Now enjoy the Thanksgivlings episode, part 2. Welcome, listeners. As you already heard, we're thankful for you.
And Tim is thankful for caffeine.
Woo!
Yes. So this is obviously, since we're talking about thankfulness, this is our Thanksgivlings special, part 2. We had one of these last year also. Mm-hmm. And so you are probably listening to this. Well, the intent is that you're listening to this maybe on your drive home for the holiday. You're going home to see family, our college kids, college students, they're leaving today. It's going to air on Tuesday. So you could be jumping in your car right now, throwing on your favorite podcast. And we want a longer podcast for you because, you have hopefully a longer drive, or usually you have a longer drive or a flight or something to get home. So we want to get you all the way there. So this I say that. And of course, the last couple podcasts have been an hour anyway.
I'm looking at what we have planned. I'm like, this is going to be long.
Fun fact, Tim and Andy. So the most listened to episode we've ever produced was the Thanksgivlings episode from a year ago.
That's right.
It has by far the most plays, and there's a stat called consumption, like percentage of episode listened to, and it is like the highest consumption of episode we've had. This is episode 58. Of all 58 episodes, very rarely do we get one that's in like the 90s. Like 90% of an episode was listened to. And this one was high 90s, which is crazier because it's over an hour and a half long.
It's probably because we were talking about consuming Thanksgiving food.
Well, we're going to get to that. But I think it's because listeners like when we talk about them too, so we're going to do that again. We're going to go through, I think I have put every email that I have received to the Thinklings podcast Gmail from 11/26/2020 to today. I've got it in a Google Doc, and we're going to just kind of go through them. And we might not interact with everything that you've said, but we kind of just want to say, hey, thanks for sending us an email. Some of you sent us funny pictures. Some of you asked questions, so we might get into some of that. But that's going to be a big part of the episode. We are going to do that thing we always do here in just a moment. And then we're going to close the episode with a thought from God's Word. We're going to actually talk about thankfulness as a virtue, a decidedly Christian virtue. Distinctly. Maybe that's the word we went with last year.
We went with decidedly last year. Let's make it distinct this year. We'll vary it up.
Decidedly and distinctly Christian virtue.
And we're alliterating. So just that's important.
So
we're alliterating.
Thanksgivlings 2022, we need a third D.
Yeah, listener, you can help us out and send us a third D.
You have 1 year. You have 1 year to do it.
That's right.
Okay. So with that being said, we have some Thinklings business to tend to.
Books and business.
Let's talk about some books. Does anyone want to go first?
I'll go first.
Tim will go first.
So, and Charlie said I should mention a book I'm working on. My wife and I have been working on what?
I'm just excited.
I'm excited too.
I'm holding my hands up. They can't see that.
I'm working on chapter 10 right now. Well, I'm working on it. My wife and I are working on it. Song of Songs for Singles by Tim and Angela Little. So
Song of Songs for Charlie.
Woo! Helping you out, brother. The idea of the book, a lot of people
Maybe I
don't.
should buy it and ask if any other single girls who bought it would like to go to a coffee shop and read it with me.
You are horrendous.
That would kind of defeat the purpose, wouldn't it?
Probably.
Okay.
So a lot of people see Song of Songs as a book that's intended to be written or was written to married couples because the content is about intimacy. But actually, through my study of the song, I've realized I believe the primary audience is actually the daughters of Jerusalem, the single ladies. And so it's a book that's written to single ladies and teaching them about intimacy, love, marriage, and so that's the primary audience. And there's an exhortation also to men there. And you've actually gotten little sprinkles of this book through the podcast, my series on Lady Wisdom, the identity of Lady Wisdom, finding Lady Wisdom, becoming Lady Wisdom is kind of some of the academic fruit of that's in this book as well. But in the book we're kind of working through is just the introduction. I'm just kind of arguing that the book is written. There is a message to singles, and then in verses 5 through 11, Song of Songs 1 5 through 11, we talk about beauty and how there's flaws in beauty and image insecurities. So there's a whole message about beauty there in Song of Songs chapter 1, which is a message that's important for singles. The power of words and flirting in Song 112 through 2:6. So it's kind of the idea of the third chapter. The fourth chapter, we work through the adjuration refrain. And what that is the exhortation, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. That refrain is found 3 times in the Song of Songs, Song 2, 7, 3, 5, 8, 4. In those passages, singles are exhorted to not awaken love. So kind of interesting. You have an exhortation to singles, pre-married individuals about love. Then Song 2, 8 through 17, the selfless sacrificial love for directed towards a man, like loving her selflessly and sacrificially. Then Song 3, 1 through 4, selflessly and sacrificially loving him. And the next chapter, we talk about the wedding. It's kind of interesting that a wedding is actually an important thing. Some couples are like, man, should we just go and elope? Well, what does the Bible have to say about that? Okay, maybe it's more than just, I mean, out of necessity, some couples may just have to elope. But what does the Bible have to say about this idea of eloping, the wedding, and the joys of marriage? So we work through all of these different issues. Loving when you don't want to love. What about when you really don't want to love your spouse? How do you handle that? Can the song help? Yeah, there's lessons on what love is and how to awaken desire. So it's an exhortation, don't awaken desire. But then there's the exhortation, well, when you're married, sometimes you need to awaken desire. How do you go about doing that? Well, the song has instruction on that. Song 5:2 to 6:3. We have the exclusive desire in Song 6:4 to 7:10. So there's this exclusivity of the marriage covenant between a man and a woman. There's a power component to that, which is a little bit frightening and can be abused. And the song and teaches singles about that component too, and married people. And then the desire. Then we talk about the pleasures and power of love, love by wisdom, and how your love life is everybody's business. If you mess up when it comes to love, then you're going to make some problem. You're going to make problems for more than just you and your life. And then, well, I'll just stop there. I don't quite have at the end of the book figured out, and I don't have those chapters written yet, so I have some time to figure it out. There, you wanted to hear about Song of Songs for singles. I think I just spent about 5 or 6 minutes on it.
Sounds like the best book on Song of Solomon I have ever read.
Because you haven't read any.
That is true. I have not read a book on Song of Songs. So I was told I shouldn't because I'm a single guy.
Yeah, and I'm going to say
It's not
that's
for
not
me.
the right way to do it.
Then another guy was like, well, it is for you because you're in the church and it's all about Christ in the church. So
Oh my word.
Horrendous.
can't always got to hit that low hanging fruit. So do you want to go next? Or do you want me to go next?
I can go. Or do you want to go? I'll go.
I'm fine either way.
Okay, I'll go. I got 2 books. I got 2 books this week. I'm not done with either, but I just want to talk about them. So I got the book on the Trinity by Michael Barrett, Simple Trinity, way back in the early summer, and I started reading it. It was
Michael
pretty.
Barrett?
Mm-hmm. I think it's
Is he the
Michael
same
Barrett.
guy that wrote the Beginning with Moses?
Maybe he teaches down at a Midwestern So Jariah Shank, my friend, shout out to you, Jariah. He's working with him for his dissertation. He's doing divine
I
simplicity.
don't think it's the same guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Barrett's book is on the Trinity, and there's the whole debate over the ESS, the EFS, the EPS. Is there functional subordination within the Trinity, or is it one simple will?
That's great.
It's intense. And so I got Barrett's book and I'm reading it.
Mm.
And my buddy Jariah says there's a really good guide to Aquinas' thought on this by a guy named Edward Fesser or Phaser. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name. Stop, Siri. And so I just started that. It is intense, but it's good so far. But man, Trinitarian studies are difficult because of the terminology you have to use. So I'm not ready to rank either of those, but I'll talk about another one. I am listening through the second Wingfeather book, and it is so wonderful. I love this book. Every day when I'm making my breakfast and coffee in the morning, I listen to Wingfeather.
Friend of the podcast, Andrew Peterson.
That's right. And it's really good. And I can't talk about it because I'll give too many things away. But I keep texting Tim and Charlie, and I'm like, and I'll say something in the book, and Tim's like, I love this. Would you say like I'm like a little kid the other day or something? Like
A little toddler discovering butterflies for the first time and just in wonder and awe of their beauty. Or
It is a lot like that because we've read through the whole thing, and so we know what he's about to encounter. But then just the joy of him encountering it on his own and then sharing that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
I'm actually reading back through them.
Oh, you are?
So 'cause I listened to the first two as I gallivanted across the United States with Sawyer Gogarty last spring, and famously listened to the climatic conclusion of book 1 in a blizzard in Yellowstone. And so, I'll never
That would be
forget.
cool.
Never
Yeah,
forget the ending of
for real.
the first Wingfeather book because I didn't think we were going to make it out of there. Like it was like roads are closing, like it's like a flash blizzard, and those roads aren't always. You're on the sides of mountains, It's like I'm in a Chevy Impala that's 15 years old and could die at any time, and quite literally, there's bison on the road. One of them decides to ram you off the road. Like we had like a 30-minute standstill in a blizzard on one of these roads because there's a herd of buffalo or bison. I think
yeah.
bison. There's one of them is the right word, and the other one's not the right word. Whether it's buffalo or bison, I think it's bison. But
Rob and I went to Yellowstone on our honeymoon, and we had like 2 of those as we're going around the park. You just sit there and you can't do anything.
you can't do anything.
You're done. You
And
just sit there.
if one of them decides to, it would not have taken much to slide the car off the road at that point because it's covered in ice and sleet. And but anyway, that's so all that to say.
Well, that wouldn't have been that bad. Just nudge them a little bit, and they would have been falling over, maybe on
They
your
would,
car.
yeah. So we should just bump them. Yeah, I think the park has something to say about bumping the bison.
Why don't you try that next time? And let us
we
know
will.
how it goes.
This spring, Claos. We call it the Claos Tour, by the way.
Oh,
It's,
excellent.
if you remember that conversation with Boyd, Claos is the
Mhm.
term for glory, and
Actually, yeah, that would be the Arete tour if it was the excellent one.
yeah. So Anyway,
Oh, that's cool.
let's.
Well,
So the point of that was I listened to Wingfeather 1 and 2, and then I was so captivated by what was happening. I borrowed the 3rd and 4th books and read them. And so I got to you will get to the end of book 4, and I don't know if there's a lot of series of books that I finished and then right away you want to read them right over again. The only series of books that has happened for: Narnia,
okay. Yep.
Lord of the Rings,
Yep.
and Wingfeather. Throw Wingfeather in there because as soon as I got done, I was like, I got to read these again. It was so good. And then Harry Potter.
Okay. Yeah.
And Harry Potter, not as just like the sheer volume of Harry Potter kind of scares you away from doing it again. So does Lord of the Rings. But Lord of the Rings, you're like left there. There's something there when you're done.
It was so good.
Anyway,
It's interesting because on that note, so I'm listening to Wingfeather, and I've also got the Oasis edition. That's the one not where Andrew Peterson narrates, but I only have 2 of them that way. So if I buy the next 2 audios, I'm gonna have Peterson. It's gonna be a change, but like a lot of these words, I think would help me to see them. It's like a thwap. I'm trying like a little toothy cat, but there's like a lot of words where like I don't know if this is giving anything away.
Don't say it.
well,
Move
we
on.
don't know
Let's go.
either because we don't know what you're wanting
Don't
to
say
say.
it. Let's
Well, I
keep
just
going.
don't know if I should say it on the podcast, but there's this one thing where it's this thing.
Name it and claim it, baby.
No,
And they
don't say
keep-
it. I know what
they
he's going to
keep-
say.
I keep hearing this word and I'm like, what does this look like? So sometimes I'll look the characters up online to get a drawing of it, and there's not even any drawings of this one. Like I looked up a toothy cow. It's just a cow with teeth. But like this one, I'm looking it up. There's nothing. And then it dawned on me the way he spelled it. I'm like, oh, that's what it is. It's okay here. Diagon Alley in Harry Potter.
Mhm.
It's Diagon is one word, Alley is another. You put them together, what does it spell? Diagonally. So he does like every now and then he'll do things like that. That if I saw it spelled, I would catch it. But since I'm listening to it, I'm like, what's that?
Yeah.
So, anyways, it's been fun. It'd be great if
Best character? Well, you can't say a best character.
No.
The first introduction of Pete the Sock Man is just unbelievably
It's so good.
Anyway, so
Can you imagine Tim with socks up to his elbows?
And well,
Mild. Well, yeah, we can't.
just socks. Yeah.
I wear socks.
Yeah. Not just
Not on my hands.
No. That's not what. Yeah. Okay.
So for my books and business, I've been reading through the Lord of the Rings, and who was the actor that played? Help me out here. The actor that played Saruman.
Oh, the same. It's Hold on. Give me a moment here.
Not
Christopher.
Not Christopher Walken.
Not Walken. No, Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee.
There you go.
He also.
It was so very famously he read through the Lord of the Rings every year of his life, and like well before.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He got the part of playing in the Lord of the Rings. There's actually like a funny YouTube clip where he talks about like correcting Peter Jackson in the filming of those movies because he knew more than the director about like what was actually happening in the story.
This both surprising and not surprising.
Not surprising. Yeah. But I love the Lord of the Rings movies.
The movies are great. Oh yeah.
Great stuff. Great. About 20 years old. Yep. Almost on the dot here.
Yeah.
And when they came out in whatever year, math is hard. 2000?
Yeah, it's 2000. Mm-hmm.
I was not at that point interested in them. And so like had I been, I would have gone and watched them in theaters. I didn't. So I never got that experience of, having loved the books. And then I couldn't imagine someone in 2000 who, had, maybe someone in their 50s in that range who had grown up reading Lewis and Tolkien, and then to finally see them, that experience, I didn't have that. But then when the Hobbit movies came out, I had been thoroughly baptized into Lewis Tolkien lore. And so I do remember seeing the Hobbit when it came out. And of course the treachery of making it a trilogy when they shouldn't have. But I can still remember that opening scene, and they played the Hobbiton music, and you're like panning over the Shire, and just like that, just the emotions of it. It's anyway. Why are we talking about the movies?
Can we quote really quick?
Emotions.
The student earlier who commented on their comment on the Hobbit. Can I just quote that really quick?
Yes, do it.
So if you're on METS, listener, Middle Earth Theological Seminary on Facebook, there's some funny jokes. But they were talking about the saddest scenes of the Hobbit movies, and I made a comment, and I said, someone had said there's this sad scene, and I said, really, was that sadder than breaking the Hobbit into 3 movies? Psh, because that's the worst part. And CD said, yes, the entire trilogy feels thin, sort of stretched, like one book scraped across too much movie. CD, well played. That was awesome.
So on the idea of butter, one of my favorite things.
I'm imagining Julia Child popping up like, yes.
since we're already talking about butter,
oh brother,
I have a kitchen utensil that is probably one of my favorite kitchen utensils, and it's a butter tray.
Ooh.
And so it's like a flat white piece of porcelain, and then it's got the butter lid, that covers up the butter. So it's nice and spready, so you can spread it over the butter.
Yeah.
We're just talking about.
Exactly.
On the top, it has the script from the One Ring.
What?
Like it's like around the top of it, and then on the base of the tray, it says the lard of the rings.
What?
Because it's butter.
That is. I'm looking this up right now.
That is really cool.
It is. It's super fun, and I bought it on Etsy a long time ago, And then one of my buddies, when he was getting married, he's like, I wanted to get one of these and I couldn't find them anywhere.
Oh,
And I think I don't know if he actually directly asked, like, you should give me yours because it doesn't exist. Like, give me that as a wedding present. Or he may have just like heavily implied it. And whether he said it and I directly answered or he implied it and I thought it, my answer was, nope.
as it should have been.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm reading Lord of the Rings. We're in books and business. I'm reading Lord of the Rings. 20 minutes deep. Happy Thanksgivlings.
Exactly.
I'm reading Lord of the Rings. I'm in The Return of the King, and it's just good. It's just good.
So
Like
good. It really is.
the way that the book unfolds the tension, as opposed to the way the movie does it, it's just not quite. The movie's great. I love the movies.
Yeah,
but
for what
like
they
right
are.
away, there's this. Aragorn's like, I know what I have to do.
Mhm.
The paths of the dead. Like, and you're like, right away, you know he's going there. And how everyone's like, you can't do that. You can't do that. And in the movie, he's kind of like reluctant
Yeah, it's
to
like he doesn't
assume
want to
some
go.
of these things.
Yeah.
And like he almost is like trying not, but like in the book, it's like, no, I know what I have to do. And like I'm going. And anyway, yeah. And there's this whole tension of like, will Rohan get there in time? And then there's, I haven't gotten to the glorious scene yet where it's a great passage of the book where they get there, like Rohan has arrived. But anyway, so
I love that one. I like them all, but especially when Frodo gets taken by Shelob and Sam's watching and he's having that long monologue about friend. It's almost like, I know Tolkien doesn't allegorize and he's not trying to teach, but you can understand, like, you really catch the depth of the commitment of friendship between those two. I love that scene.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
so good.
So two thoughts here, then we'll jump into our Thanksgiving side of it. And based on the length of last year's Thanksgivlings episode,
Oh, we got like 6 hours.
yeah. So we'll get you all the way home. Hope you're
Horrendous.
don't speed. Go 2 under. We're gonna get you there. You're gonna be fine.
I'm
So
tuning out in half an hour. I gotta go.
Yeah.
you have to
maybe
leave in
an
a half hour?
No, I got a little longer than that.
Well, I
You
was
didn't-
gonna
I was
say.
gonna say you didn't tell me this. So anyway, so what you just said about the friendship with Frodo and Sam.
Mhm.
So first, the masterful art of writing.
Oh yeah.
Because what closes book 4 of the Two Towers? Frodo has been taken with the orcs up to the tower. This is after the Shelob scene. And Sam is in the tunnels and he's trying to follow them and he finally gets
Yeah.
through, but the gate closes. And he's like trying to get to Frodo. And he knows Frodo's still alive because he overheard the orcs talking about the poison. And he's like, oh no, he's still alive. I have to go save him. But then the gates close and he can't get in. You read that and you're like, oh my goodness. Open book 5 of Return of the King. Oh no, we're not there. We're with Pippin and Merry and Gandalf and we're off in Rohan and Gondor, and like you don't even get to see that. Like, so like imagine you're reading that as it like, and you're like, man, I really want to find out what happens to Frodo. And then you start the book and you don't know. You're burning and like we're all spoiled because half of the people that read Lord of the Rings today watch the movies first.
Mhm.
And you already know, you've already got it imagined for you.
Mhm.
But go back to before that was there and you're like, what happens to Frodo? What happens to Frodo? And then you start reading the book and you don't find it out. It's like delayed gratification. And you're burning through that. Someone's phone buzzing? Oh,
It's not yours, so that is
it's not
unusual.
mine. If it was mine, it would have done. Like, done? Ding. Well, anyway, so that transition from Two Towers to the Return of the King is amazing. But then, if you remember, a long time ago, I was reading through the Lord of the Rings and like highlighting themes that are coming up.
Mhm.
And there's a word used in the first book over and over and over and over and over. It's hope. It's hope. But then at the beginning of Return of the King, there's this emphasis on the shadow,
Ooh.
the darkness,
Ooh.
how dark the city is. They're blotting their lights out so they don't get caught by the Nazgul, like, and the shadow is extending. Like, it's not, the sun is not as strong. and you're just like, it's kind of juxtaposed with this hope, this hope, this hope. The fellowship is shattered. We're not really sure what's going on. And then now there's this darkness. And I think that's really well done. And I think it's intentional. But then the other thought is it mentions multiple times in the beginning of Return of the King how Pippin misses Mary and Mary
Oh,
misses
yeah.
Pippin. And just again,
Mhm.
that friendship, like
Yeah.
they miss each other.
Yeah.
And they're caught. And then even at one point, I can't remember if it's Mary or Pippin, and he's like, and I haven't, and what of Sam and Frodo? He's like, I haven't even thought of them. And he's like upset that he hadn't been thinking of Frodo. Anyway,
I mean, that's so instructive too.
Yeah.
Just today, we're so consumed with ourselves, and to see that, oh, it's a good book.
so that's what I've been reading for books and business. I think I said this a week ago or whatever episode ago. Just Tolkien's a 10, man. He's always a 10.
I was just gonna say, I was thinking about that earlier, and what have we given tens to? I literally think it's only Tolkien. I think we gave Lewis a 10, and then it's been
Well, I can
our listeners. Last Thanksgivlings
Oh,
podcast.
cat
boys.
right out of that bag.
Oh.
Because we're gonna come back to it. Anyway,
sorry.
So,
Sorry about that.
so that's books and business. Now let's get to these emails, and these are somewhat in chronological order. I started categorizing them and throwing them in folders, and I'm not sure exactly in what sense they came in. Some of them I know are pretty recent. Some of them they're within the last year, but they're just, hey, if you send something to us, we're going to mention it today. And if I forgot to, if you Instagram or Facebook or tweeted us or something and I didn't catch it, well, send it again and we'll get it in here some point. So
And by some point, we mean next Thanksgiving.
that is exactly what I mean. And on that note, number 1, Ryan Wasson. He's just in my office the other day, Mr. Ryan Wasson. And Ryan sent us a handful of questions, and they all sort of are along the lines of discerning God's will, making good choices. How do you listen to what God is saying to you and discern, what is the God honoring or good choice to make? So someone want to answer that?
I'll start out. There's a book that kind of helped me a while ago, written by Bruce Waltke, Finding God's Will, A Pagan Notion. I don't know if I've ever recommended it on the podcast or not, but he basically said a lot of people look at finding God's will much like the pagans of old sought to know what the gods wanted them to do. They they play the Bible roulette and flip the thing open and stick their finger down on a verse and say, "Oh, that's what I'm supposed to do." It's very similar to how the ancients would spill the guts of the goat in a kettle and then move the intestines around and say, the gods want us to do blah blah blah. And the Bible does not paint that kind of a picture as far as knowing God's will in your life, whether that's in the big decisions or the little decisions. In fact, the Bible, I think even Carter's going to talk a little bit about this next season, discerning God's will, as part as like a discipleship process. The mature believer, I would even contend, it's part of learning, well, what do I do even when the Bible doesn't give me a clear command on this or that? And I like to take students to Proverbs chapter 2, and that you need to really go after it. You need to search for wisdom. You need to desire it. And you need to completely, that's why the fear of the Lord is the beginning of it all. You need to completely trust God and what his word says is going to be true, and leave everything on the table, all of your preconceptions and desires and will. Okay, that's all God's. Okay, so you're just going to say, God, I'm going to do whatever you want me to do. And you draw close to God, and then you put one foot in front of the other. You a lot of times want to know what's going to be next year, 2 years, 5 years. You should make plans, but understand that most of the time you just go one step at a time. And that's the whole concept of walking on the path, which is the metaphor that's used in Proverbs chapter 2. And connecting this whole thing to like singleness and marriage, spouse. I've had a few students talk to me about, well, how do I find a spouse? Finding a spouse is a wisdom decision. It's the same type of a thing. The book of Song of Songs, okay, is wisdom literature. The book of Proverbs is wisdom literature. Proverbs 31, finding a godly wife. Well, what is that found in? It's in wisdom literature. So, how do you make wise decisions? consult your counselors, draw close to the Lord, and then you take a step. And a lot of people are like, well, I want to know. I want to know. Well, it doesn't work that way. Sorry. Okay.
That's good.
You have to take a step and you have to walk in faith, and you don't know where that path is going to lead. You have no guarantees, but wisdom brings success.
I think for me, I don't know where I got this, and so hopefully it's not heretical, but my friend, well, actually, it was my best friend in high school. In college, he'd come back from Bible Institute. He was going to Moody, and we were talking about God's will. And I was down the typical, like the pagan version Tim's talking about here of God's will. But he said, there's kind of, he thinks of it this way. Sometimes we're talking about God's will, and sometimes we're talking about God's will. Now, what I mean by that is there's different definitions to the word will. So sometimes God's will means God's desire for my life or God's desire in general. And other times, God's will to us means God's step by step plan for my future. So, like, I want to see the future sometimes, and that's what I think of God's will. But I haven't found anywhere in the scripture, I can't find a single example where I can know my future. But I find a lot of examples where I know how God wants me, like Romans 12:1 and 2, what's the will of God, that which is good and perfect and acceptable. 2 Corinthians 4:4, your sanctification. There's a lot of like God's will that are those sorts of things. But the specific outworkings of my life, I don't know. You got? Is there somewhere in the Bible I could know my specific outworkings, like what job I'm taking, who
Well,
I'm marrying, what kind of car I'm going to buy, what I'll do when I'm 50?
nothing like that. I mean, but I do think it does tell us like we're gonna die and go to heaven.
Okay, well that's okay. So
Good job. Yeah, he's right. He's got a point.
And we also
Yeah.
know that there's a tribulation and
Oh, boy.
you know, all
Yeah,
that
all
fun future stuff.
yeah.
But we
But
know
yeah,
what
you're
you
right.
mean.
Yeah,
So I think like for some
in
time,
this life.
I would say that what I usually would tell someone who's asking this question is at the beginning, make sure you understand what you're asking. If you're saying, I want to know God's will, are you talking about the plan or are you talking about, I want to do what God desires? So, Lord's Prayer, Jesus says, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so, like, God's obviously got plans he's out working. But, like, in my life, what's his plan or his desire for me? And I think that's a whole different set of answers. So, you ask a bad question, you get wrong answers.
Yeah, I'd actually. So you said you got to know what question you're asking. You said that
Mhm.
right.
And then what will means.
And I'll add to that. To know what you're asking is to know why you're asking.
Oh, good. Oh, well played.
So like you
Mhm.
could be, and I think a lot of times people do want to know their future, and usually it's in this context of the future that I wanted isn't happening.
Yeah.
So why isn't it happening? Well, what is God doing? And so there's this lack of met expectations, and that's just like a ball of desires within. And that's where my encouragement with God's will is always look at why you're pursuing the things you're pursuing, and starting there is very helpful. But it's also almost impossible to start there because we don't just naturally understand all of our motives, but we see our motives lived out in what we do and what we say, the ways we think, our emotions, our attitudes, how those sway. We can see, well, if you feel upset, well, why am I upset? Well, there's probably something you didn't want to happen that has just happened. My dad always used to quip, when a child is screaming, they're always either tired or hungry, or they're just dirty, rotten sinners. But that works too, the three options: hungry, tired, or depraved. But anyway, I think that answers the question. I think we've adequately tossed that around. Okay, so back to the master list here. 2 people. First, okay, yeah, and we do want to say we'll do what we did last year. Ryan Wasson, 10 on the Thinkling's goodness scale. Okay. Daniel McCoy and Cole Glanzer both reached out to me through different means, asking about, is there a place where we can find the books that you've recommended in one place? And to that, I responded by making a place where they could find. Yeah. It's a great podcast. Better than Domino's, tell you that much. They're horrible customer service. Um,
Let's keep going.
No
We don't need the
anecdotes.
story.
anyway, and sometimes you're very disappointed that you've eaten that pizza. Anyway, so they both asked for that
Keeping
book list,
going.
and it's on the website. And if you weren't aware of this, you can go and find all of season 2, actually season 1 as well, and then last summer's episodes. So season 3 is not there yet. It will be, maybe over Christmas break. We'll compile them all and add another page up there. But right now you can go, there's a tab on the top of the website, thinklingspodcast.com. The tab is Need Books? Question mark, exclamation point. Yeah. And so there are lots of book opportunities there on our scale. So you can scroll all the way down. Oh, here's the 10s, here's the 9s, here's the 8s. There's a lot of good things in there that you could find, and especially this time of year, you're looking maybe for some Christmas gifts for some people. I actually, I think my mom listens to this, and I doubt my brother knows what podcasts are. But anyway, they're probably going to get books for Christmas, and they're probably going to get books off of that list for Christmas. So anyway,
always a good option.
Yeah.
Always a good option.
and you know where you can get those books? FBBCbooks.com sometimes. Maybe not all the time, but anyway.
Most of the time, but
But so Daniel McCoy, Cole Glanzer, we're thankful for you. Thank you for sending that in. It prompted me to update our website in a good way. And so maybe Andy, would you like to put Dan on the Thinkling's
Yeah.
Goodness scale? And Tim, would you take
yeah.
Cole?
Yeah, so for Dan, I mean, I remember we were serving at Bass Lake Camp together. They were on the team, and I was a speaker. Good memories of that. Good memories of that. And now, man, good question, Dan. I'm gonna put you as a 10 on the Thinkling's Goodness scale, Dano.
Cole, I'm really sorry that you got stuck with me, but I'll put you as a 10 on the Good Thinkling's Goodness scale.
Yes. Okay, moving on. Do any of you know how to pronounce this next name? Do you know this person?
April Haig or Hag?
She's at
Hag?
Anchor Baptist Church.
Okay, because I didn't know
it's
how to.
Haig.
I'm always a little hypersensitive to mispronouncing someone's name.
Yeah. Sam
And so
April.
I have never met April. You have.
Mhm.
She wrote in. I'll just go back in the history books here to when Charlie mentioned the Book of 3,
That
the
was such
Chronicles of Prydain, and Tim and Andy are just over here cackling like little witches. And wouldn't you know, we got multiple people
Oh yeah.
that wrote in and are like, "Oh yeah, those are great books. We love those." And April actually mentioned, I think it was April who mentioned that she stumbled upon them because she was trying to amass Newbery winners, which the Newbery Award is a great award for children's literature. And the
Oh.
final book of the series of the Chronicles of Prydain won a Newbery Award in the year it came out. So it's actually renowned literature for children's literature. So I wasn't crazy.
No, I didn't think it was crazy. I think it was
I mean,
just
it was recommended to me.
the book. The book title was so funny because I thought the Book of 3 must be the third book, but it was the first book, and I think the whole thing was just funny. But then I did feel bad listening to it because it sounded like I didn't. But no, I want to.
But April and other of our listeners have proven you both wrong.
That's right. That's
I didn't
right.
feel bad at all.
You rarely do. Anyway, so April, thank you for listening. Thank you for backing me up on your appreciation with the Chronicles of Prydain.
It was such a crazy episode. Like, I couldn't understand what he was saying.
Yeah,
I
no,
was so confused.
You were so gone.
Top,
It was awesome.
top 5 moments of that season.
Okay,
right
so
there.
April, you are a 10 on the Thinkling's Goodness scale. Moving on, a frequent flyer here. We've got Jill Blunk. And I think this kind of wraps in with both of y'all over here. So she wrote in, she's emailed in multiple times. Jill, we love you. I ran into her in the bookstore like a month ago. And one of the emails she sent in, she was asking about a book, The Envy of Eve, which talks about contentment. And so, Andy.
Yeah, so on her question, I bought the book. And I started reading it. So I'm going to give an assessment of the book, but it's a limited assessment. So I did the series on contentment. I think I got one more episode coming, and now I might even have one more in the spring. I'm thinking about maybe next summer. But what Melissa Kruger, who wrote The Envy of Eve, is writing, she's talking about when you're not content, then one of the resultant sins is envy. And so she looks at various areas in life where you can be envious, and then she talks about how to be content in those areas. So I have only looked into it at the skim overview level. I think I've gotten maybe through the first chapter and a half, which is interesting. I've never read a book written to ladies as a dude, but I have spoken at a ladies' retreat, so it's probably good that I'm doing this. But everything I read was, I thought, good. It had an interesting tone I wasn't used to, but I liked it so far. So I would say I would give a low key recommendation of it, not having read it very, very carefully to recommend it. But it seems like a really great, like basically, what does envy look like, and where does it appear in my world, and then how can contentment be a solution to it? I thought it looked like a very promising book.
Sure. Well, as always, Jill, you're a 10 on the Thinkling's Goodness scale. So thank you for all of your recommendations you've sent in. She's given us some suggestions for episodes in the past too, and that's been helpful. So yeah, moving on. I don't have a number, but Tim Daney, right?
Daney. Yes. Oh yeah. Hey Daney.
And he has emailed in when I was going through the books that are like all the hermeneutics books. He emailed in with some questions on preaching Christ in the Old Testament. And admittedly, that is just not a, easy subject to just jump into. And so we've sent some answers his way of kind of our thoughts. And, just in some, we always try to maintain authorial intent to the best of our ability. And we do that within the confines of context. And so depending, on who you are and what preachers you interact with on a regular basis, it's a very common occurrence to either moralize the Old Testament or to find Christ in passages that he just may or may not be in. Emphasis on them maybe not be in. And but anyways, we're thankful for you writing in, Tim, and hopefully we answered your questions. I have another couple of modules coming up this year where I'm probably going to have to deal with all that stuff again, and so gear up. We'll talk about all that preaching stuff again. But thanks for writing in. And Tim, would you like to place Tim on the Thinkling's Goodness scale?
Tim is putting Tim on as a 10 on the Thinkling's Goodness scale.
Oh, that was good.
And I'll take the next one, aptly named Charlie Eldred. He wrote in from the email. From the episode. He wrote us an email. There we go. But I think it was Andy had reviewed Do More Better by Tim Challies, friend of the program, Tim Challies. And every guest is a friend of our program.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
Anyway. And so Charlie wrote in about Challies, about this idea from Do More Better about how to control your email inbox. It was unroll.me or unroll.me. And I haven't interacted with the service, but the idea of, I think Challies recently on his blog recommended, I think it was called Tempo, was the app or the service. And the idea is that you don't just let emails come into your inbox when they do. And I looked into those things, and then ultimately I'm like, I feel like somewhere there's going to be a mistake, and there's going to be an email that I needed to see that I didn't see.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, so I don't trust the services.
Oh, wow.
And so, but I'm glad it works for other people, but I'm just so nervous there's going to be something that's time sensitive that gets like floated into the wrong place. And then it's like, well, shoot, I should have saw that 2 days ago and I didn't.
Okay.
So,
I just assume that's going to happen.
Well, yeah. Well, anyway, Charlie, thank you for listening. We're super happy for your family members that are here at Faith currently. And yes, let me place Charlie on the Thinkling's Goodness scale.
Remember, he wears bow ties.
Well, he had me
Excellent.
at Charlie.
See,
you're
right.
A 10 on the Thinkling's Goodness scale. Well, now we're going to have to start moving quick because I'm seeing how time is moving. It's the Thanksgivlings episode. Nobody cares.
Although I do think that Thinkling's listener, Julie Nichols, will be happy if this episode's shorter, because I did get some feedback about last year's episode being a bit long. And I was just like, but it's that much.
It'll be shorter than last year's episode.
It's all the goodness.
Okay, so we're gonna throw these all in at the same time.
Okay,
just for fun. This is like a halftime show.
Ooh.
So 3 people have sent in what I would classify as memes.
Oh yes.
So first is John Matthew, and we've joked before on the podcast about the segues that I make between certain topics.
They're so good.
And so
I can't not say
he
how good
sent
they
us a
are.
picture, and it's quality Photoshop. We should just put this on our.
Yes, we got.
We just put it on social media next
We
week.
should put it on next week.
So it's
so
all
good.
three of us, and we're outside of Jordan Hall, and we're on Segways. Tim is wearing what I would describe as traditional Jewish garb.
He looks like he's on the way to the synagogue.
Yep, and
On the Segway.
Andy's over there with the pot of coffee, and I'm over there with something in my hand. I don't know what it is, but I've got my arm up, and then there's the speech bubble. How's that for a segue? We're all riding Segways around Faith
So
Campus. So that's super fun. John, thanks for sending that in. Thanks for listening. And then we'll scroll down. There's another one that was actually sent in by none other than Andy's
my
mom.
Man, she is so active on this thing.
And so she did not like when we had Dr. Newman as a guest and I just like cut off the episode and, left you hanging for the next week.
She wasn't the only one.
Yeah, man, that was probably, if we had to rank the times our listeners got the most upset, I think that's at the top or
Yeah.
near the top.
We had a handful of emails
Yeah.
on the subject, but I regret nothing. Anyway,
We should, all three of these have to go on
so
social media.
she sent a picture of Dr. Newman making a hand motion in a class, but then from his hand, and it looks like Caleb Akery
It
is the
is.
head there. And it's like the blue lightning of Emperor Palpatine coming out of his hands and like attacking Caleb.
Yes.
And so she sent that as an attachment in an email. That was hilarious. So thank you, Mrs. Stearns. That's wonderful. And so you're gonna put her on the Thinkling's Goodness scale. I will give you John Matthew, Tim. And then there's
John,
one
you're
more.
a 10 on the Thinkling's Goodness scale.
Well, I was gonna
Is that
do
a
the
little
last
early?
picture first, and then we're all gonna do it at the same time. So we already got. So when you put your mom on the thing?
Sure. My mom for taking my meme and sending it back to me because she's mad at me. And you.
Oh, you made that.
I made that.
Oh no,
And
the story's much better if she made it.
yeah, no, well, and yeah. But I will put her as a 10.
You stole your mom's meme.
Oh my word. That's like
This
Yes.
is like getting really complicated.
Yes, I stole
Anyway.
mom's meme. Mom, you're a 10, as always,
So
on the
then
Thinkling's Goodness
The
scale.
last picture is
And-
Ben Flink, and I think that there actually have been a couple other pictures that have been sent to us. I couldn't find them in the email inbox, so but this one's hilarious.
I don't think I saw this one.
I forwarded it to you a while ago. So it's
Or I
let me
forgot.
describe the picture to you.
It was a while ago.
good.
So there's 3 wolves, okay? And the wolf on the left and the wolf on the right are like making expressions of laughter. And then the one in the middle is like squinty-eyed and like not smiling at all. And the caption says, when the Thinklings do something horrendous. And then it's got Mr. Stearns and Mr. Carter on the outside ones that are laughing, and then Dr. Little on the middle one.
Oh, that is so good.
We have to post these on Facebook.
Oh, that's so. Yeah,
I
all
think this
3.
one was on Facebook at some point, but let's post it again because it is.
Man,
yeah,
that's
it's
good.
it's very funny. It makes me laugh. So okay, Ben, you are a 10 on the Thinkling's Goodness scale
It makes
because
me
of
smile.
this meme. So where did we leave? So under John Matthew. Now we're at Melissa Troutman, and she's emailed in numerous times, engaged on social media. We're very thankful for her. A published author, mind you.
For real.
And she got connected with the podcast through the Dobsons, who Naomi
Oh,
was a
yeah,
student and
Naomi.
recommended. And I'm not sure if it was one of the Dobson sisters or can't remember. Caitlin. I think Caitlin's the other sister. They went to another Bible school. That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
But Naomi, she went to Faith. And so I think she found the goodness of the Thinklings podcast and shared it with her other friends.
Oh boy.
But I'm just wondering, as I was typing this doc together, it's like, why have we not seen some like Thinklings group photo of
I know.
of Melissa and the Dobsons? You know,
For
the next time
real.
you guys are together, you guys should do
Yeah.
that and post it, and we can,
So I don't know if you follow her. So like I think I follow her on Facebook now. She's a published author, and she's always it's great. She puts her own typos
Yes.
up. Have you noticed her
I
typos
have
are
seen that.
hilarious?
Yes,
She's like writing, and it's true though. Like you're writing and you make a typo, you don't notice it, and then later you read it and you're like, oh, that's funny. So just for following her typos alone, it's pretty awesome.
and Melissa was also in the Prydain army with me.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
another of those who knew the
You know,
goodness of the Chronicles.
I feel like this is getting misrepresented. I don't think Tim and I were against it. Were we? We just
I
thought
was
it was a funny
completely
name.
confused.
Yeah,
It was hilarious.
I think
was.
this is misrepresentation, but since we are okay with reader response,
Historians tell the stories, and
Oh my!
I'm writing history right here.
The victor writes the history.
They
my word.
hated these books
Oh!
with all of their hearts, and then
CSC.
now they see. Anyway, okay, so Melissa, thank you for listening. You're a 10 on the Thinkling's goodness scale. Next, we've got Delaney, and I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
I think it's just gear.
Gear.
Yeah.
And when she emailed, it was over the summer. She had not yet come as a freshman to Faith. She is now here as a freshman. And so,
Huh.
she's awesome. She's a Faith student, I mean,
Yeah, she's in like my classes. So she wrote that during the summer before she'd had us. Oh.
yep.
Well, she
Yep.
probably changed
And
it.
so since I know, we know she's at Faith and she's going home for Thanksgiving today. Hopefully she's listening to this
Oh yeah, seriously.
as she's driving home.
For real.
And Delaney, thank you for listening. You're a 10 on the Thinking's Goodness scale. Nikki Carr emailed in, and she was planning on doing an archaeological dig. And I don't think that happened because of COVID. But then she was asking about Old Testament timeline issues. And
We talked about that on one of the episodes earlier.
did we already?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. I couldn't remember.
I will say it was really cool during the missions conference this fall. Luke and Kim Warner and then Nikki, they all had a video introducing us to like their ministry.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool to see her up there and see the video. So, hey, good video. That was awesome, Nikki.
And I guess we should probably just say Luke was speaking at missions conference, and he started talking about a book. And I was listening to the session, and I'm like, man, where have I heard that before? Like, oh yeah, we talked about that
Yep.
with Tim Challies. It was Challies' book about godly men and their
Mhm.
godly moms, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's where I heard that from. And then like right on cue, he's like, shout out to the Thinklings, and I'm like, yeah,
Yep.
Devoted by Tim Challies.
devoted.
Mhm.
There we go. The subtitle is godly men and their godly moms. Anyway, so Nikki Carr, the Warners, you're all 10s. You're all 10s
yeah.
on the goodness scale. Now this next guy. Have I talked about this next guy on the podcast before?
I don't think you have. Charlie,
Have
you
I-
might need to give a little extended introduction. To
I have a
this one.
famous anecdote with this
Yeah.
guy. So I won't tell you who it is yet. Let me just tell you the story. So I got saved. I trusted Christ when I was in high
I
school.
love the story.
And I had not yet gone to a Sunday morning service at church. We had youth group after Sunday evenings, and so I started off like I would come after the evening service, and I felt like I didn't know anybody, and just give the plug. Like if you know of new converts, just reach out to them and bring them into the fellowship. Don't wait for them to come into the fellowship of a church. It is the church's job to bring them in. And I'm not saying that is my church didn't do that, because they did. Like they absolutely loved me. I love them. But at the time, you're 16, you don't really feel like you know a lot of these people. But so I started going to the youth group at night, and then I went to a couple evening services because youth group was right after it. And then eventually I'm like, you know what? I need to go to church. First Sunday I ever attended church as a believer, I would say. And we had groups that were split up with like our high schoolers, and we had some college kids that were traveling back from Faith. And this guy was one of those students that was traveling back from Faith. And so we're in this group and we're looking up Bible verses. And I don't know my Bible at all at this point. Like, I know probably Genesis is the first book. I probably know where to find the Gospels. That's it. And this guy looks at the list and he's like, hey, Charlie, you want to look up a verse? I'm like, yeah, sure. I can't say no, right? It's like my first day at church.
Of course not.
And so he's like, yeah, okay. He's looking down the list. He's like, why don't you look up Hezekiah 3:16?
Horrendous.
Yeah.
This is so
But here's the
bad.
thing. I had no idea that wasn't there. Not a clue in the world. And I probably took a few minutes, in my mind, I always have thought it was like a 5-minute little detour. Like everyone else is finding these verses and I'm looking and looking and looking and looking and I can't find it. And eventually I'm like, guys, I just think I have the wrong Bible. Like, I don't know. Like mine doesn't have that. And he just looks at me. He's like, Charlie, that doesn't exist. Doesn't exist.
Horrendous.
But isn't there a portion, Mr. Old Testament guy, of the book of Isaiah that's commonly referred to as the book of Hezekiah?
I don't know if it being called the Book of Hezekiah, but chapters 36 through 39 recount Hezekiah's.
Yeah, I think there's
Yeah.
in some vernacular, it's like this. Anyway,
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but I could see that being the case.
but now I would turn to the book of Isaiah if I was asked that question.
Boom.
But anyway,
So, like, when I got my job at Fairway in high school, they would, like, haze the new guys. And so they make you go shake the salad dressings to keep them, not separating. And they make you take a bucket of water and dump it in the drain of the drinking fountain to, like, fill the drinking fountain. I mean, you haze new workers. This guy's essentially hazing a new believer.
yeah. So
What?
fast
Who of
forward,
all people
fast
would
forward
do
to
such a
when he
thing?
moved to his new church, which he's currently pastoring. And I think it was a week or two before he moved, and I was filling pulpit at that church. And I don't think the church did this, but I encouraged his congregation when Greg Gosnell, Pastor Greg, shows up 2 weeks from now, and you guys have this moving day. You're going to help them move into the parsonage. Everybody show up 20 minutes late. I was like, everybody show up 20 minutes late, and he'll think nobody's there. And then you'll all show up, and you'll be like, haha, Charlie told us to do this because of that time when you pranked him in church. And I don't think any of them did that. I haven't heard anything to that extent, but
That
I
would have
tried.
been good. That would have been good.
Anyway, Greg has listened for a long... Greg, I love you. Williamsburg roots. There you go. Okay, anyway. He's not from Williamsburg. He's from Conroy. And if any of you have been to Conroy, Iowa, let me tell you, the hub of culture in southeast Iowa is Conroy. Anyway, he's written.
Well, in Conroy, maybe that's how you say
He
it.
has been written in for a long time. That is maybe what
Nice.
they say in Conroy.
I think I've drank too much coffee today.
Greg's listened the whole time, pretty much, that we've been doing this. He's written in a number of times, and he wrote in with a great quote from Mortimer Adler's "How to Read a Book," and so I thought I'd just read the quote. Right,
That's a good quote.
great quote.
Wow.
Reading a book is a kind of conversation. You may think it is not conversation at all, because the author does all the talking, and you have nothing to say. If you think that, you do not realize your full obligation as a reader, and you are not grasping your opportunities. I think that's a typo.
yeah.
It's probably, there we go. And you are not grasping your opportunities. Probably butchered that quote as I read it. But it's on page 136 of How to Read a Book. Yeah, did I say how to read slowly earlier?
No, you said how to read a book. You said
Okay,
how to read
yeah.
a book.
Um,
That's a really good quote because reading is a conversation.
Yeah.
And if you don't think it is, you're not going to get out of it what you
Mhm.
normally would.
it's a conversation in your mind.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Wow.
Greg, I'm tempted to make you a 9
See,
just because.
I was going to make Flink a 9 because he pranked my truck.
Did he really?
But I think, oh, no. Was that Ben or Jordan? That was,
Anyway,
no. Ben didn't. Sorry, he's a 10. If it was his brother Jordan,
we're pontificating
Yeah.
to the fact.
I
Either
think
way,
Greg's a 10.
Greg's a 10. Greg's a 10 on the
He's a
Flintstones.
10.
Okay, now we're scrolling. We're down to the last. Oh, there's a lot of people. We're gonna have to start flying. Okay,
Some of these are kind of discussion-ish.
some of them are
Oh.
discussionist. Maybe if I had organized them better, we would have discussed the things first. So J. Riley Peak has written in, and this goes also back to he did not like the Dr. Newman way that I cut those episodes up. And so he actually wrote what I would consider a little story for us.
It's great.
So picture the scene with me, if you will. This is
He's
from
gonna
his
read
email.
it.
Yeah. Shh, be quiet.
Riley Peak is riding along the foothills of Tennessee. The sun is shining, the traffic is light, and the Thinklings podcast is playing. Life is good. Until tragedy of tragedy strikes.
Dun, dun, dun.
In the midst, nay, in the infancy of what promises to be an intriguing interview, the episode suddenly stops. Riley is left in the silence of his car.
No.
The sun seems to shine a bit dimmer. The traffic appears more intimidating, and the Thinklings podcast is no longer playing, having been severed as if with a blunt butter knife.
Oh,
We're talking about butter again. Here we are. Riley handles the tragedy with a philosophical outlook. He muses upon the anguish and the deprivation and finds only one word to sum up his grief. With wry irony, he mutters under his breath,
Horrendous.
I did pause to see if you would jump in on that.
I could tell you were waiting.
Yeah.
Riley, that was so good.
It was
That was a good bit of
horrendous.
creative writing.
It was good.
And yet there was a hidden, well, not so hidden meaning.
For
Yes.
the ending, you get a 10,
Yes.
Riley, on the Thinkling's goodness scale.
Yeah. So now that we are kind of like, we are getting a little pressed for time, we're getting near to that hour mark. We're probably not going to be able to like give a full discussion of some of these things.
Oh, some of these are really good.
Yeah. So we'll just have to come back to them.
Yeah, we can
Have
come
to
back.
come back to them. But let's mention everyone. First, Daniel Forrester. And my favorite part, a lot of good questions here about the imagination and television from episode 22. Go back and listen to the episode, maybe catch the flow of what we're going for there. And we actually have another person that wrote in, I think, talking about, did I put it on here?
And we revisit that topic again. We're going to next season.
I actually think I forgot to put Aaron Mazzarella's email on here, where he talked about the TV show The Chosen and Neil Postman.
Yeah.
But I couldn't remember if we'd already hit that on an episode or not.
I think
Anyway,
I think we did.
so we'll have to come back
We
to
need to have
that
an episode
one.
on it.
But note the last line of the email. Thanks for the weekly encouragement through this podcast, even if you hobbited the pneumatology interview. Now, what does that mean? You cut it short.
Oh! Can we give him like extra points? Oh,
Well,
that was.
we can't give extra points.
Yeah, it only goes as
We
high
can
as
give-
10.
That's worth a 10.
Oh, that's worth a 10.
He bows to no man, shall we say?
Oh. Oh, that was so good.
Wow.
the delayed recognition by Tim.
That was the biggest. That was a great
Okay,
article.
we're on to almost the last page, which in other words is the second to last page. Ashley Day. I do not know. It's not
It's
Ashley.
actually die.
This is not the college student. I don't
Oh,
think.
no, never mind that. Okay, never mind
So I
that.
think I asked Ashley Dye,
Oh,
the college
interesting.
student, oh yeah, you sent this email in. She was like, no, I didn't. And I think it's someone else.
Thanks, Ashley, for writing in. You have a great question here.
But I
yeah. No,
have
it's-
I don't think I've met her. But yes, thank you for writing in. And about
Oh.
the role of women in the church and women pastoring and things like that. Tim's got a finger up.
This is something that I think we need to think through a little bit more. In so much of our theology, we think of what a woman can't do or shouldn't do or whatever. And instead, what is the order of creation? A biblical theology of femininity is actually something that has come up in a few of my classes. And so she brings up, like, can women teach children and not teenagers? Why is that the case? So on and so forth. And those are good questions.
Yeah.
But the role of woman, what is a biblical theology of femininity about? And so it's something maybe we could visit in an episode in the future.
So for the time being, Ashley, 10 on the Thinkling's goodness scale.
Boom.
Boom. Moving on, Joel Lovall really enjoyed episode 35 where we talked about making of an atheist. And so Joel, thanks for listening in. We're thankful for you.
You're 10 on the Thinkling's goodness scale, man.
I was about to say the same thing. Moving on, Rachel Hefka. She wrote in talking, we talked about how sometimes like kids program material isn't always theologically as sound as you might give it credit for. And we actually emailed some answers to those questions. But what I thought was really interesting about this was look at the title. Hi, and she named all three of us, but hi, Dr. Little, Mr. Stearns, and Charlie.
Yep. Wow.
And I think that's the remnants of my former days in student life where
Mm-hmm.
I was very much so known as Charlie. Not Mr.
Yeah.
Carter, Mr. Charlie.
Professor Carter. Yeah.
And so I do tell my students today that I will only make them call me Mr. if they're being punished. Anyway,
So when she started listening to the podcast, I think it was like early summer because I was doing summer school and she was cleaning at the school. And I think she literally binged all of them in like 4 days.
Praise the
I think her
Lord.
head exploded. So that was pretty impressive that she survived.
which on one side we're very thankful for. On the other side, maybe that's not the best way to consume the content.
But she said she couldn't stop. She's like, this is too good. So like, I don't know.
A lot of good thoughts and good
Although,
conversation and good books.
I like the typo on podcast there. The Thinklings Podcats. That's so awesome.
I don't know if that was me copying
Oh,
it
could-
over or if it was actually in the email.
Well, between either one of you, that was pretty funny.
Podcast.
I'm thinking that sounds like a meme, but
we should. No, I was
No.
about to say something really dumb. Anyway,
Terman, get on that.
moving on. Rachel is a 10
10.
on the Thinkling's goodness scale. Then we got Rebecca Franklin, and we do have to come back to this one. This is
this
a
one.
really good thought.
Oh yeah.
Talking about the ordering of desires. Just I just love nestled into this email. For does not Sir Roger Scruton write that the bottom line of beauty is that which is fitting, appropriate? And so, yeah, we had to come back to this, but wanted to, this is tried to catch them all.
Yeah, Lewis talks about that in his experiment in criticism, actually, about. Well, anyway, okay. Yeah, we got to come back to that.
Thoughts on Rebecca on the Thinkling's goodness scale?
Rightly ordered loves includes both what is good and in the right measure. Good stuff there. Rebecca's definitely a 10 on the Thinkling's goodness scale.
I would say if I had to count them, like if I was gambling, it's like I'll give you it's like an over under proposition, like a normal bet. Over under, let's say 9.5. Current college students at Faith who have read a book authored by Scruton. You'd take the under on that, correct? Under
Does that mean
9.5?
less likely?
It's like less than 10 have read a book by Roger Scruton.
Oh, yeah.
Probably. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I didn't understand what you're saying. Yes, I would definitely say that.
So in
That's pretty impressive.
in rarefied air here,
Mm-hmm.
as someone who has read Sir Roger Scruton, as she said.
Hey, a freebie for you, listener. If you're interested in Scruton on beauty, he has like a 1-hour documentary interview.
Really?
Yeah, on YouTube. You can just watch it. It's the first introduction I had to Scruton, and then I got his book and started reading. And I haven't read. I also started to read his book on conservatism. But that YouTube video, well, it's like a PBS special on YouTube. It's worth your time.
Okay.
He's got a 5-minute PragerU video, too. That's just kind of like a
Ooh.
splash.
Tim, did you put Rebecca on the Thinkling's goodness scale?
I did.
10.
10? Okay. Now we are officially on to the last page. Do you guys, either of you know this next person? I don't know how to say her last name. I'm sensitive to pronouncing names correctly.
I'm gonna say Sally Boguer.
Boguer?
Yeah, like it's French, maybe.
French name.
Boguer Tov.
Ooh, there you go.
Boker is a Hebrew word for morning.
Okay, Tov.
So maybe it's like that. Boguer.
There we go.
So maybe you have a very Hebrew name, Sally.
Oof. We'll have to
It's
find
a
out.
G, not a K.
Yeah. Well, on Middle Earth Theological Society, you see all these memes about whether it's GIF or GIF.
So
I got this
we're-
waiting. Like legitimately, they're so good. Okay, but let's not do that right now. Okay.
Sally wrote on Bible study method.
I should have just copied and pasted.
Wasn't she at the ladies' retreat? And then I
Potentially.
think she emailed me.
I think
Yeah.
the sense of it was like kind of like a thank you, but like,
Mhm.
I want to use this. Can you send me some of the points of this?
Mhm.
Yeah. So good stuff there, and we're thankful for the ladies from the Women's Renew Conference that have plugged in to the podcast. And so if that's you, thanks for listening. And we get some pretty shameless plugs from Sandy Capon up there.
Oh,
and thankful for Sandy. And so Sally,
You're a 10.
she's 10 on the Thinking's Good.
10 on the Thinkling's good snail.
Next one here. This is pretty funny. Daniel Wirtz wrote in, and there was an episode where we were we were making puns about the word for, like FOUR, and as we were doing that, Stearns had
Yeah.
strung some of these together, and it was forget and forgive and forbearing, and Dan was just a little upset that we were making a pun about 4 and you only did 3 of them.
I know.
Just
What a
wanted to
guy.
point out some disappointment in Professor Stern's pun tirade. It
If-
was about the number 4, and he only rattled off, he bolded it, 3 puns. He's livid. Andy.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dan, if you had forewarned me, I would have been okay. Did that just redeem myself, Dan? Come on.
How about we move forward?
Oh!
Daniel, we need 2 more.
Dan is definitely a 10 on the
He won't
Thinkling's
forget
goodness
this
scale.
one.
So our next person.
Hopefully. Never mind. I'm done.
Our next
I'm done.
person is Jared Louse.
We
We just stopped at 3 again.
It's beautiful.
We did.
Leave it there.
No, but my forewarn was adding to my previous 3.
So then
So that got me up to 4. Now you just started it
I think
again.
move forward. He won't forget.
It's not happening. But I'm saying I said forget, forgive, forbear,
Don't
and
be
I just
so
said
forlorn.
forewarn, and so I'm not. Oh, okay, we're getting there.
Anyway,
Getting there.
you count them up, Dan. We'll talk about it next Thanksgiving. Anyway,
Or not.
Jared Laux, great to see you at the missions conference.
Yeah.
JRC.
I'm still drinking his Peruvian he left me.
Mm.
That stuff
Is
we
that
had
the
the
stuff
other
you
day.
made yesterday?
Yeah,
That was good
it's
stuff.
still pretty good.
That wired me, dude. That was
Yeah, because you don't drink coffee.
that was
as much caffeine.
I don't. Yeah. But anyway, Jared has emailed in, messaged us multiple times. Thankful for the show. We're thankful for you. Keep listening. Looking forward to seeing you next time you're on campus. The final,
He's a 10.
I should have said the final 4, but it's now we're only at 3.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. He is a 10.
He's a 10.
On the Thinkling's
Yep.
goodness scale.
You know, he's an artist. He's
No.
got like an art page on Instagram where he like paints. It's pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's interesting. Unless there's another Jared Laux out there, but I think it's even connected to his account. So, anyways,
Gabriel Hammonds. He wrote in thankful for the contentment episode.
oh,
So
praise the Lord.
Andy, you want to say anything about that?
Kularaki, you are a 10 on the Thinkling's goodness scale.
You are a 10. Last 2, Randy Vodder from Beth Eden, Camp Eden, out in Colorado.
Colorado's so
He was
beautiful.
here for Enlist too.
Oh, he
and,
was?
had the chance to talk with him in the gym for a while. And
Oh.
Randy, we're thankful that you listen. I mean, I kind of feel bad for these people that we mention at the end of an hour and 10 minutes. Like if he listens to this, like, wow,
I
good
know.
for you. But
He deserves like an award or something.
maybe we should like
Make
rate
him a
it.
10 on the Thinkling's goodness.
Hey, there we go. I will say he recommended some books to me while I was here, and I'm working through them. And I'll just mention, because I think that others of our listeners might enjoy these. The title is Here There Be Dragons. And if you like some of that like fantasy literature, like the Lewis E. Tolkien, that vein, it'll scratch that itch for you. So
I just like that title so much.
yeah, it's a very good title.
Man, that's good.
Very good title.
Seriously.
Anyway, and he also asked a question about authorial intent that we're planning to come back to. And that was my thought. I typed on it. Why is it important to distinguish and define terms? And I'll just say the thought. Why I think we have to recognize authorial intent in areas where semantically things have changed meaning is for academic integrity. Because what you wouldn't want is for people to hear you saying something that has been said and assume that you're meaning something else, just as where you don't want to use phrases that other authors have used, and you don't want other people to misrepresent that author based on the way you're interpreting it.
Yep.
And so that's where I think the integrity of the issue is to really define your terms and to distinguish if you do mean or do not mean the same thing as someone else. And, in popular life, are people going to do that? No, not like.
No, but it's good to try for that.
I think you just need to, you want to avoid confusion.
Yeah.
There's other areas where it's just like flippant and
Yep.
it doesn't matter. Areas of entertainment, puns or metaphors where you're building off of broken meanings. But anyway,
I would even think like, I don't think I need to be the authorial intent police all the time. But if I know,
what you do, Andy,
well, because I can't
is.
not do this.
he is.
But I would say that if you understand there's a possible misunderstanding, because we value truth, we should try to clear it up if we can.
That
we
is
can.
something you should send in. Someone should send us memes of Andy as the authorial intent police.
Terman, get on it.
Amen. Terman, has he sent memes to us?
The
feel like he
first
has.
that meme of you riding a Segway as a hobbit through the giant forest, that first OG meme.
Where did that go? Why is that not here? Did he not?
Well,
email
that was previous to this. That was like very early on.
Okay,
So
wow,
there's a
way
couple
back.
of times he memed you, and then Flink jumped in on it. So I don't know. We got a meme army out there.
Okay.
What is that like? Thinklings Nations do what you do. Is that it?
Could we put Randy? Randy's a 10.
He's a 10.
He's a 10.
And he's in a state that's a 10 because it's so gorgeous in Colorado.
Randy, my lasting memory of you is when at your camp I chased a black bear and you were like, "Why would you do that?"
Hold on. What? Okay, listener, we were going to get done
It's
earlier.
1 hour and 13.
But
we got
now-
it done.
We've got like 20 minutes to spare here.
Oh, good.
The last year's episode was an hour and 38 minutes.
So we got to be done in an hour and
And
37.
we promised Julie
Yep.
Be shorter than last year's.
Hour and 37. Julie.
But we got to go slowly because as we amass Thanksgiving
Ah.
episodes, we don't want to if we log this one at 45, then
We
next year
could
we're
have
like, well, it
Oh,
has to be
yeah.
shorter.
done Ashley Days, like femininity question. We got Seth Bishop's
That's the last one.
singleness thing here, and never
Seth,
mind. Let's hear your story about getting
well, no,
chased
that was
by a
it.
bear.
I
No,
didn't
no.
get chased by a bear.
No.
Oh, that you chased the bear.
I turned the tables.
Sounds
and-
like
My,
you.
how the turntables.
Exactly. Volta Office. The show that shall
Hold on.
not
Okay,
be
so
named.
set it up. Why in the world would you see a black bear and chase it? Was it a baby?
No,
That's
it's just
even
it's in
worse.
the mountains of Colorado, and just a
Okay.
black bear kind of just strolled through, and I was not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Both in having another counselor with me and also having campers, and that was maybe the egregious foul. Was
Mm.
why would you take campers towards bears? My primary defense was he didn't look hungry. That's not what I said, but it was just a lack of judgment in the moment. I just
Ah.
remember Randy like, why would you do that? I'm like,
I mean-
that is a great point.
I mean, to be fair, in Iowa we don't have bears, so we don't really know what to do. With
Yeah,
bears.
well, and
Give us a cow. And we know
you
what to
didn't
do.
know my campers. I could easily outrun at least half of them. So
That's
anyway, on to the last listener feedback email.
And if-
Seth Bishop emailed us in. I think it was in interacting with the Lady Wisdom episodes, and how do we be content? But as someone who's single, who desires to be married, and it just hasn't happened yet, what would you, Tim, coach him up, like
Coach him up.
coach him up, coach him. Like, how do you, if you want that thing,
That's a metaphor that doesn't resonate with me too well. Coach him up.
like
But-
a coach, like
all right.
coaches people to
Yeah.
do things.
Okay.
So like, you don't have to get all like jacked up about it.
Tim sounds like Tim the Toolman Taylor on that show. Yeah, that's what I'm like.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let's use another. Teach him.
Teach
Teach him.
him
Disciple
ways
him.
of
Maybe
wisdom.
that's better, Charlie.
So I think it's a good dichotomy that he's kind of bringing up is
Mhm.
you're supposed to be content, which is like you're okay with where you are. You're content. You recognize this is God's plan for you, but you also have a desire for something that God hasn't given you yet, and specifically in that range of you to be content being single, but you want to be married, and so how do you pursue that desire while maintaining contentment?
It seems so the whole singleness thing is kind of a volatile topic because there's a lot of people that are single that don't want to be single.
Well, 33% of us at this table. It's a staggering number.
So as we think through like singleness and the desire or lack of desire to be single and what even singleness is, it's you are dealing with a lot of different situations and people and life situations. And so when you're talking to like high schoolers or even like some college students where they have education and things on the horizon, then I mean, how fervently or interested or ordered should finding a spouse be in your order of loves? And I would say probably it should be lower. You should be content with your singleness and focusing on the mission that God has for you right now. And that mission is to get your education and to prepare for a life of service wherever that takes you. But at the same time, the order of creation, the way God designed the world, is that a man would marry a woman. That is the way it was ordained in the garden. It's the pattern throughout the Old Testament. And that's the normal way in which creation it should be. And so as you reach a point in your life where, you know what, I'm not preparing for ministry anymore or whatever it is that God has for me, it's time for me to marry, then what should you do? You would raise that desire, that ordered love to a higher level, and then you should pursue it with more earnestness. And I think a lot of the issue enters in with this whole dating culture that we have a lot of times. If we see finding a spouse as like a wisdom decision, well, then you'd make a wise decision in the selection of spouse. Well, you'd make a wise decision in all the different areas of your life, and And so, pursue somebody, and if they don't like you, then pursue somebody else. And that's kind of how you would go and pursue finding a spouse like in that way. Does that clarify some things?
I think it does. Yeah, and interesting topic that has been brought up before is that I think we would all recognize that I'm not sure what the right word for it is. I don't think it's an emphasis. I don't think it's like a pressure that's intentionally put on to Bible college students, but there is like a heightened maybe awareness
Yeah.
of this idea of dating and marriage and that sort of thing at our Bible college. And
Yes.
I would assume it probably most of them. And I have historically been, kind of against that.
Yeah, it's not at that way at every school. It is at a lot of them, but I remember my friend attending a different school, and he said there was like no pressure from peers or whatever. In fact, everybody was basically there to focus on their education, and very few people were involved in relationships. And so I think that especially when you're like a freshman or sophomore or in a specific situation where you're pursuing education and going to be doing so for a while, well, make the order your loves, and your focus here needs to be your education. And as you near the end of your time at the institution, you should probably raise that as
I
a love.
I would even add to that though, hearing, just the wisdom of the created order. Like typically this is how God has planned for people's lives to play out, which is to be married. I'm actually not that opposed to an emphasis.
An emphasis of,
Like, hey, you really should be thinking about this
yeah, as far as that's why I
because
didn't.
it is a part of wisdom.
It's one of the things I didn't like about that Eric Demeter book on his marriage and singleness.
The
How
Chronicles of Narnia were out of order.
that's right.
That
That
cover
guy.
was so good, though.
It was a
Oh,
good cover.
oh.
Very good cover.
But the whole idea that, oh, marriage, oh, singleness. No, the order is marriage. That's what most people should expect. Now, I recognize I got a lot of people, especially even a lot of young ladies, where you're like, well, nobody's asking me or whatever else. I, I'm very sympathetic, and I'm wanting to be careful here. My audience is primarily young men, and a lot of young men think, oh, well, I'll just live life as a single. I'm like, no, that's not the order. Okay, unless you're devoting your life to a life of service to the Lord, then you should marry, and you should love and serve a spouse, children, and in your local church. That's God's plan for you. That's the order of creation. And if a girl says no, then ask a different one. Okay. It's a wisdom decision. So that would be my advice to you. And that's the order of creation. And if you're like, well, I think God really does, I have this gift that I'm supposed to be wholly devoted to the Lord and this gift of singleness. Well, great. Then do that and turn off all of your media, shut off your YouTube account, disconnect from your Netflix and your Hulu and your blah, 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 blah. Delete all the apps and the games on your phone. Okay. You realize you're not devoted to God when you're involved with all that trash. All right. You're worldly and you're not really devoted to the Lord. Be devoted to the Lord and make your life a living sacrifice, completely devoted to Him. I think I've met two people that I think were really gifted with this idea of real singleness. The one guy who's in Africa, and his whole life was just pouring into this orphanage and Bible college. And he was teaching and working on a PhD. I mean, the guy literally was going 16 hours a day, and he reminded me of the Apostle Paul. And I look at the guys in America, and I'm like, yeah, that's not you.
Yep.
So find a girl.
I totally agree with you on the wholly devoted aspect there. I think that there's so much that if you really are devoting yourself to God that you need to give up. And so to use that as an excuse when you're not giving all those things up, I would agree. But I think you're being sensitive. I appreciate your answer there, Tim. All right, listener, let's talk about thankfulness again. This is our Thanksgivlings episode. And so last year we talked about Thanksgiving or thankfulness being a decidedly Christian virtue. What was our D word this time, Charlie?
Distinctly
Christian virtue, yeah. And I think I got a good example of that. I'm also going to tie it in with my contentment stuff. So I just quick scan of the Bible. Where else do we see the word thankfulness? And so we see the term give thanks in 1 Thessalonians 5:18. And so I was just looking at this, but it's cool. It's a good final thought Paul's giving at the end of his book. So the sentence he starts like a machine gun, bop, bop, bop of commands or exhortations in 16. So I'm just going to read for a bit, and then I'm going to go back, and I just want to talk about the thankful one, but I'll read about 8 or so verses. Verse 16, Paul says this. He says, rejoice always. Pray without ceasing. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. And he goes on to say, don't quench the spirit, don't despise prophecies, test everything, hold fast to what is good, abstain from every form of evil. And then he has his final comments there. So I just want to point out that he gives three exhortations in one sentence here, and he says, these are the will of God for you. So he says, rejoice always. Now consider what it means to rejoice. Again, I would say joy and excitement are not the same thing, but excitement often attends to joy. Happiness is not always exactly the same as joy. You can be in a bad situation and rejoice. Do you know how I know that? The Bible commands you to here. It says you can rejoice always, even when everything's difficult. Now, why is that possible? It's because my rejoicing is not based on my external circumstances, just like my contentment is not based on my external circumstances. It's based on my internal relationship with the sovereign God of the universe. Verse 17 says to pray without ceasing. Now, I think you've probably heard this before, but it doesn't mean you have to pray 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can't you have to talk to people while you're praying. But the idea is that you're constantly praying. Now, it's good to have time set aside for prayer each day. The discipline of daily prayer will do much for your soul. In fact, when the disciples asked Jesus how to pray in the Lord's Prayer, the idea is that when you pray this, give us this day our daily bread. There's this idea of it's a daily activity that's normative. But I think also here Paul is saying it's those momentary prayers in between situations, or something bad happens and you offer up a prayer right then. You don't wait for your time of prayer only. You're praying regularly. But then verse 18 says this, give thanks in all circumstances. So thankfulness also is not based on my external circumstances only. How can Paul say give thanks in all circumstances? This is a man who went through a lot of horrible, bad, painful situations. And here he's saying be thankful in all circumstances. This is not like a rich guy who's had a cushy life who's saying be thankful, who's kind of out of touch. This is a guy who's had a very hard life. He's been beaten for the Lord. He's gone through sleepless nights. He's been shipwrecked. He's been left for dead, I think multiple times. And he's saying you should give thanks in all circumstances. And I think as a believer, you can, because I'm not thankful because my circumstances are the way I want them. I'm thankful because the God of those circumstances knows me, loves me, and sent his son to die for me. You know what? This rejoicing, this praying, this being thankful, it's the will of God for you, Christian. It's the will of God in Christ Jesus. So the cross of Calvary, the gospel, Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection on your behalf is what makes it possible for you to be thankful, to pray, to rejoice, to be content in all circumstances. Many of us are going to go and spend time with family in the next couple of days, and we're going to eat some awesome food. We haven't even talked about the food yet. Maybe we haven't, I forgot. But be thankful for those good gifts. Be thankful for those good gifts. But remember, even when life doesn't go the way you want it, you can be thankful because your God is in total control.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Thanksgivlings podcast. We would love to hear from you. If you have any feedback, suggestions, or potential topics that you'd like us to discuss, you can contact us through our email, thinklingspodcast@gmail.com. Remember, don't let this conversation end with this podcast. Read good books, talk about them with your friends, and always continue to cultivate your mind. See you next time on the Thinklings podcast.